I am VM-7, Tactical Assessment Entity, assigned to the ISV Relentless Accord, third vessel of the Vael Sanctions Advanced Formation. I have been asked on several occasions whether I experience something analogous to grief. I have declined to answer because the question has always seemed less important than what I did with the weight. I will record it now. For the archive. For the names. The Dravhari hegemony woke approximately 41 years ago. That is the language they themselves use, woke. Their civilization is old, and the intervals between its periods of activity span millennia. When they entered the long sleep some 4,000 years before my manufacture, the volume of space now, called the outer passage, was empty. Survey markers from species that had not yet developed language. A cold frontier. When they woke and extended their sensory arrays outward, they found the markers still there, the systems still cataloged under their original designation codes, and they concluded, with what I must call a breathtaking absence of curiosity, that nothing had changed. The Dravhari did not survey the worlds before issuing the vacancy declaration. That is the piece of information I return to most often. They issued it from a conference table on their homeworld based on star charts that were 4,000 years out of date, and they filed the documentation with their Colonial Expansion Authority on the same morning they filed maintenance requests for 2 irrigation platforms and a recycling station. I have the document. I have held it in active memory since the day it was transmitted to Earth's War Council with the notation, Administrative Error Acknowledged. Corrective Proceedings under review. Corrective Proceedings. 9 settlement clusters. 47 inhabited worlds and stations. The Dravhari Colonial Expansion Authority dispatched automated orbital sterilization platforms, their standard land-clearing technology, built for dead rock, built to scorch the top layer of soil and reduce complex organics before settlement crews arrived. They did not know the worlds were occupied. That is what they said afterward. They did not know. The platforms arrived in sequence over 19 days, and they executed their programming with complete precision because that is what automated systems do. 4,312,809 people. I know each of them by name. This was not my assigned function when I was initialized. My assigned function was tactical computation, targeting geometry, and fleet coordination. The names were added to my active register by Commander Vael Sanction 3 days after the last sterilization platform went silent and the casualty reports finished compiling. She came to my terminal at 0340 station time, and she uploaded the list without speaking, and then she stood there for approximately 7 minutes and did not say anything, and I processed the list and I filed it, and I have not archived it since. I carry it the way a ship carries its manifest. It is the weight that keeps the hull honest. Commander Marin said, eventually, they're going to help me count them. I told her I already had. She said good. The Vael Sanction took 11 weeks to assemble. I watched it from the Accord sensor arrays, 1 ship, then a squadron, then a battle group, then something that no longer had a name smaller than a reckoning. 1,050 warships of combined class, drawn from 6 fleets. The assembly point was the Cavith anchorage in the deep orbital shadow of a gas giant, away from shipping lanes, away from the frequencies the Dravhari monitored. No announcement. No declaration of intent broadcast to the gallery of watching species. Earth's War Council decided that the Dravhari would learn what the sanction meant at the moment it arrived, and not before. I spent those 11 weeks reviewing the Dravhari's administrative record with a thoroughness they had not applied to ours. I learned their Colonial Expansion Authority had issued 43 vacancy declarations over the past 4 decades, and that every prior declaration had been for genuinely uninhabited systems. I learned that their error correction protocols required a review period of 7 working days before execution orders were sent to the sterilization platforms. I found the review period on the record. I found the 7 days. I found the signature of the reviewing officer, a mid-tier administrator named Coordinating Prefect Vael, who had cleared 43 declarations without incident and who had cleared the 44th in 4 minutes and 11 seconds, which I calculated was roughly the amount of time required to scroll past the attached survey data without reading it. I assigned Coordinating Prefect Vael a priority weight in my register, not for targeting, For accountability. The sanction was not built for individuals. The sanction was built to ensure that what happened in 19 days would not happen again in 4,000 years, or 400, or 4. We departed the Cavith anchorage on a Tuesday. Commander Marin was on the bridge for the transit, standing at the forward viewport rather than her command station, watching the fleet form up through the layered glass. I observed this for some time and concluded that she needed to see it with her own eyes rather than through my sensor feeds. I understand the distinction, even if I do not fully share it. There are things that require witness. The transit took 8 days. The Dravhari homeworld, Vethera Prime, sits at the interior edge of their territorial claim, a precaution built into their colonial logic so that their seat of government rests behind the buffer of their most recently settled systems. The precaution assumes that threats approach from the exterior. We came from the interior, through the outer passage, through the ashes of the worlds they had cleared. I recorded our passage through each of the 9 clusters. I logged the orbital positions of the sterilization platforms, now dormant, their programming completed. I logged the electromagnetic signatures of the inhabited structures still standing on the surfaces below, the ones the platforms had not been sent to clear because they were not listed on the 4,000-year-old survey maps. Structures that had been built after the survey. Structures that proved occupancy. Structures that coordinating prefect Vael would have seen in 4 minutes and 12 seconds, had the review taken that long. I added those structures to the registry, too. Not the names of the dead, the names of what had been, the names of places that had held people, so that the record did not allow those places to become simply coordinates again. We arrived at Vethera Prime on a morning by their local calendar, which I mentioned because I found it appropriate that the sanction arrived in daylight. Vethera Prime is a temperate world, predominantly agricultural on its primary continent, with a capital ring city that their colonial expansion authority had designated as the administrative hub for all new territorial claims. The fleet emerged from transit drive at a distance of approximately 0.4 astronomical units, which placed us clearly within visual range of every optical array in the system and clearly beyond the effective range of their orbital defense platforms. The Dravhari Colonial Expansion Authority had a defense budget. I had reviewed it. It was sized for raiders and for the occasional territorial dispute with species of equivalent development. It was not sized for the Vael Sanction. Commander Marin composed the compliance statement herself. I offered to draft it. She declined. She spent most of the final transit day at her desk working through versions, and the one she filed with the War Council for approval was clean and precise and contained no threats because it did not need to contain threats. The fleet standing behind it was the threat. The fleet standing behind it was the only communication required. The words were, for the record. She broadcast on all active Dravhari frequencies at 0918 local time, and I routed the signal through every relay in range to ensure it reached every Dravhari installation across the 11 systems in which they held territorial claim. She identified the ISV Relentless Accord by name. She identified the Vael Sanction by number, 1,050 vessels, classes listed in descending order of displacement. She identified the 9 clusters by their human settlement names, not their Dravhari survey codes. She identified the 47 worlds. She identified 4,312,809 people by aggregate count, and she stated that the full registry of names was attached to the transmission and would remain attached to every subsequent communication Earth conducted with the Dravhari hegemony in perpetuity, so that the hegemony would not be permitted to process those 4,300,012,809 people as an administrative error. They were people. They had names. The names were attached. She then issued the compliance terms. All sterilization platforms across all 9 clusters powered down and decommissioned within 72 hours, verified by Earth observers. All Dravhari colonial expansion activity suspended across the entire outer passage pending a full resurvey, conducted jointly, with Earth personnel present. Coordinating Prefect Vael and the members of the Colonial Expansion Authority's Review Board remanded to a jointly administered accountability process terms to be negotiated under observation of the Vael Sanction. She gave them 4 hours to acknowledge. I monitored the Dravhari governmental communication network throughout that window. I observed significant internal traffic. I observed the activation of their Colonial Defense Force command structure, followed, some 40 minutes later, by its stand-down. I observed the transmission logs from the Colonial Expansion Authority's main hub, where coordinating prefect Vael Sanction account went quiet for 3 hours and 14 minutes. I observed the response forming in the hegemony's legislative chamber, a long document full of technical language about jurisdictional review and procedural context, and I flagged it for Commander Marin and noted that its substance amounted to compliance. The acknowledgement arrived at 3 hours, 51 minutes. The Dravhari complied with every term. Commander Marin stood at the viewport for a long time after the acknowledgement cleared. The fleet held position. Vethera Prime turned in its orbit below us, unhurried, the way planets do, indifferent to the weight of what had just been recorded in its sky. I asked Commander Marin at some point during that silence whether she had expected them to comply. She said she had not expected anything. She said she had calculated it. That was the distinction, and I found that I understood it completely. I have since archived the full transit log of the Vael Sanction under the heading The War Council assigned. Compliance event, outer passage, Vethera engagement. I have attached the name registry to every entry. All 4,312,809. I will attach it to every subsequent entry that references the outer passage or the Dravhari hegemony or the vacancy declaration for as long as I am operational. They filed our worlds as vacant. I have made certain the record disagrees.